it's enlarged now. All right. How are we doing in terms of attendance?
We only have one member, Chair.
We only have one member.
And you the second one, too. I'm admitting Mr. Mutle now, Chair.
You're admitting Tabo, okay.
And I think, there's also Mr. Mutsamai.
Mr. Mutsamai, good evening. Good evening, Mr. Mutsamai. Okay. Okay, may I invite you to flight the agenda? Tabo, good evening.
Good evening, Chair.
Yes.
How are you, colleague?
I'm good. How are you, Chair, and honorable members on the platform?
I'm very well. I hope you are using a different gadget for this one. Eh?
Yeah, no, I've tried to log in with a different gadget.
Thank you, honorable member.
I'm still in the house. Yes.
Yeah, I'm also still in the house because we'll be taking a vote.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that is fine.
All right.
Motsumai, good evening. All right, so I can hear you. It looks as though it's just Honorable Mutle, Honorable Mare, Honorable Matsomai, Honorable Nkosi, and myself. It's just the 5 of us. I think we can start. The meeting. This is the agenda of Nandipa. I don't know, your agenda no longer includes the preliminaries.
Oh, sorry, Chair.
Yeah, and it's the second, I think it's for the second time that you present it like this without the first two parts. So you must bring them back because your minutes must mirror the agenda items.
Yes,
now,
sir.
Yeah, okay. So I'm bringing them back, which will then reorder the items. What appears to be item number 1 there will be item number 3, and the renumbering will then for the rest of the items will then follow accordingly. We have colleagues added one item, which is a matter that was not foreseen at the time when we drafted the program for this term, and particularly for today. Is that item is the consideration of the presidential letter of employment dated 17th March 2013, and the ministerial letter of employment dated 13 March 2023. So this item has two matters to be deliberated. We've invited the chief joint. We've alerted the defense force, let me say DOD, that will have this item on the agenda, so that the Department of Defense designate the team or a member to come and take us through this item. So I've seen that they are members of the defense. There is representation from the Department of Defense in this meeting. Yes, there is. So, but let me, before I ask to be taken through the items, let's deal with let me welcome you all to this meeting, and then say that, and then take the apologies. Do you have apologies, Nandipa?
Yes, Chair, there's an apology from Ms. Ngosi, Ms. Bartlett, and Mr. Ryder. Thank you.
Mr. Ryder. Okay. All right. You see, legally, I don't know, Mr. Mare and Tabo, and because we are logged on both, we're in two meetings at the same time. I think legally, if it comes to a vote, I'm not quite certain if our presence on two platforms may not jeopardize our votes.
Chair,
yes, who's talking?
it's Kobus Mare.
Yes, Mr. Mare.
I don't think so, because you will recall that in the past, when I recall in my time in the Parliament, when we had a meeting, a committee meeting, and there was also a sitting, and when the bells rang, we excused ourselves from the committee meeting and we went to Parliament for the voting.
Okay.
So I think if we do it, if there is a vote, which I doubt,
okay.
But if there's a vote, then we can do it on that same basis.
Okay. Okay. No, that I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
We'll do that on those bases. That if they were called into the House because there is a vote to be taken, will ask to be excused from this platform, go dispose that off and then come back. Yeah. I'm happy with that. So we can simply just, for now, we are monitoring the situation. Thanks, Mr. Murray, for that. All right, colleagues, I think we have disposed of that issue, which was worrying me. We can then now check who is in the department, representing the department, before I establish who will then take us through the items that require the attention of the department. Can I get an indication of the representation from the department? Manelisi? Oh, Minister, good evening.
Chair, good evening.
Good evening. Thank you. Welcome, Minister. Thank you so much. All right.
I'm trying to see who is here myself because I was still at the DORA discussion.
Oh, yes. So it's us. So, no, Minister, I think we are fine. I said Manelisi, I meant to say Monaga.
If I'm not wrong, CJ Ops is here.
Yes. Okay, yes. Thank you so much. All right. Okay, Minister, we're now going to item number 1, And maybe just check, let's speak to item number 1, in fact, and item number 2, which is item number 3 and item number 4, if you add the first 2 items. Just speak on the 2 and then invite the team to take us through each one of them. Your opening remarks, Minister?
Chair, you are asking us to start with the first item. I thought the first item is talks to the report of the NCACC.
Yes, Minister. You can just give us your opening remarks, which may actually cover the 2, if you so wish. I understand that the first item you are not responsible for, but you may still want to make a comment, and then after that we'll invite the NCACC to take us through the presentation.
Yeah. No, thank you very much, sir.
Thanks, Minister.
I do understand that Advocate Jele will be on standby to take us through, but I must say that relatively speaking, 2022 saw the NCACC meeting more frequently. It has seen us re-looking at all the other areas which we were treading very carefully around. It has also seen us looking at substantial growth in how we're doing our stuff. But for us, the NCACC is a strategic measurer of what product lines we have, what credibility we still have as a country around the international world of the military. But it also says that we need to be very careful these days, because sometimes you see your products being run somewhere when you know that you have not sold them there. But it is also a measure of progress, of how innovative we are. Now, comparatively speaking, we're still selling, maybe for lack of better exposure as I am to the South African defense industry, I still remember the old products. But I am worried about us resuscitating the defense industry, because then we will see the difference in the frequency, in the income generated from the sales that will be in the NCACC report. I'm also hoping that Advocate Jele will be able to take us on board on whether or not we are still frequently and on time reporting to the UN on whatever it is that we are doing in the site. But it is in fact a discussion that we must take maybe sometime later in the year about just how we want to influence innovation within this, so that muscle that we need to be pulling in resource-wise in the world by the sales that will be generated through the NCACC is felt. So I would say that I would take it there. I would also think that, Chairperson, when it is still early enough in the year for us to be looking at the program of the committee, to be able to start saying whether we should be, both sides, the committee and ourselves in the ministry and in the entities, to look at whether or not we do want to come back to you and ask for amendments. I do notice that some of the things that we are doing sometimes are thrust upon us, and we are frequently not able to attend all the meetings. So it might be a good thing for us to prepare quarterly meetings where we can still say, yes, we confirm that that program that you gave us at the beginning of the year we are keeping to, or can we switch this for that, because which means that NATI from our side, we must always be prepared to keep to the program and not necessarily not have standby issues which we might bring in. Chair, I can't take it any further. As I say, I just logged in, so I'm a little bit, I try to adjust to what I can do right now. But I would say that with Advocate Jelle around, maybe he could lead us on that discussion. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Minister, for those remarks. And without much ado, let me invite Advocate Jelle, the head of NCACC Secretariat, to take us through the presentation.
Good evening, Chairperson. I must acknowledge Minister Modise and your fellow committee members. I suppose also the joint chair, Chair Traveling. I will ask that the presentation be flighted from that side, so that I can actually focus on what I want to actually share with the committee.
If you are comfortable with setting your video on and will not impact on your network, I would welcome that you do that. But of course, when it interferes with your system, you are at liberty to switch it off. Thank you so much.
I do have my video on.
Okay, no, you may go ahead, sir.
Okay, I must also apologize. I'm actually without the chairperson currently, who is still on his way back to the house because of the processes that were actually ongoing in Parliament. So I'm sort of like out on a limb here, but Minister Modise is there as also my principal as regards this matter. Can we have the second slide, please? Second slide. The NCACC would like to thank the Joint Standing Committee on Defense for this invitation to present Q4 and the annual report. The NCACC has approached the task as follows, where we are indicating that Q1, Q2, 3 of 2022 have already been tabled in Parliament and were also presented to the Joint Standing Committee on Defense. So today's presentation will cover Q4 and the annual statistics for 2022. As a committee would recall that the statistics are compiled on a calendar basis, which is on the basis of the UN regulation, as opposed to that being done on a financial year basis. And we trust that the Joint Standing Committee accepts this approach. The procedural matters related to what I have to do today is that we report to Parliament in the prescribed provisions in terms of the NCACC Act. And whenever we are actually being called to present, because the committee must or has to perform its oversight role, would always be obliging to come through. And the reports that we actually are presenting to yourselves, as stated earlier, would have been tabled in Parliament. Q4 and the annual reports were tabled last week. Briefly, the next slide, the context of the domestic context in terms of the legislative imperative means that what we do is envisaged and provided for in terms of Section 41 of 2002, which was the primary act as amended to eventually be Act 73 of 2008. The amendment happened in 2012. And this is actually the key point to anchor act when it comes to the regulation of control items. And that together
sorry,
with the regulation.
who is supposed to be moving the slides?
It's me, Chair, but I'll wait on him to instruct me to move the slides, Chair.
I thought he has already asked you to move the slide. You're still on the first one.
No, Chair, I think it's the network. I'm on the third slide now. 6
You're on
slides
the
of
third
the
slide.
top. Is it not
okay.
showing, Chair? Can't you see?
It's
No,
not showing on this side.
no, on our side, my side's also still.
Advocate Jenny,
Yes.
do you have any difficulty flattening it on your side so that you can take control of the movement of the slides? You have been made a co-host.
I'm going to try and do this and let's see if it will work. No, it's actually not responding. No, I'm not having any joy from this side as well.
Is it?
I'm going to exit the sharing again and let's see if it can be. Let me see if I can
exit
do
the sharing and then you go to your emails, or not emails, or your
PowerPoint presentation.
your PowerPoint presentation. Yes.
Chair, it's Valerian speaking. If the advocate does not come right, I can also try from my side.
Please try from that side. I'm actually battling. My internet is stable this side, but I'm not too sure why it's not responding.
Okay. Willem, please try. All right. Can you move Willem to? Yes, it is. Can you go to the second slide, Willem, just to check if it? Oh yes, then yours is moving. Okay, over to you.
Flip over again. I've covered this now. Next slide. Next slide. This is a slide I'm on now. As I was explaining to committee members that the anchor piece of legislation is the NCACC Act 41 of 2002 with the regulations that are attendant thereto. And then the secondary act that is actually anchors the NCACC Act is the Foreign Military Assistance Act, which is the current act in place. However, we have the Prohibition of Military Activities and Regulation of Certain Activities Act that has been assented to by the President, but that has not actually been regularized as yet. Next slide. These are the committee members of the NCACC for the year under review, with the chairperson being Minister Gungubele and the deputy being Minister Lamola, and the rest of the members of the committee as indicated here. Next slide. This is a refresher for those that had not seen this, but actually forgotten, that the tiers of decision making at the NCACC are based, with the NCACC being right at the top, as a cabinet committee, with the chairperson now being the Minister of Communications and Digital Technologies, as of the recent cabinet reshuffle. And scrutiny committee has got a chairperson who is currently the acting Secretary of Defense, Dr. Gamede. The entities that actually are that consist of the scrutiny committee or form the scrutiny committee, as well as the NCACC, the DOD, DERCO, DTINC, the SAPS, State Security, and up to point Defense Intelligence. The reports that are actually presented to the committee are as in terms of Section 23 of the Act. I will cover a few aspects here, given that Minister Modise spoke about whether we are actually reporting as frequently as we should to the UN in terms of what the requirements are. I can inform the committee that we are actually consistent in reporting to the United Nations as far as following reports are concerned. Is the United Nations Conventional Arms Register, and this one for the year 2022 was approved by the NCACC in the February 2023 meeting. At that same meeting, we also had the NCACC approve the Wassenaar Arrangement Report, and both these have been filed with the respective secretariats of the UN in terms of reporting. We are envisaged to have the ATT report approved in the NCACC meeting of March, upon which, when such approval has been granted, we shall then also file this with the ATT Secretariat in Geneva. This we shall do through DERCO, who does this slide, please. Next slide, please. Next slide. As a reminder as well, Section 15 is a cardinal section of the Act when it relates to the criteria that is used by the NCACC and all its constituent parts when there is an evaluation of applications that have been presented. I think here I can cover aspects that relate to when an applicant, which is a South African entity that is registered the Act, presents an application to the NCACC. The first criteria that actually needs to be looked at both at scrutiny as well as at NCACC is whether the intended recipient of South African material is not placed or has not been placed under the Security Council resolutions that include an arms embargo. In instances where that is the case, often the committee would not consider the application favorably, unless if in the resolution there is an operative paragraph that allows for the lodging of this request through the sanctions committee, which is often the case whenever there are such resolutions by the Security Council. The committee might consider that. It, however, becomes a long-winded process and has not been used so much in the past. The second aspect that the committee then looks at is whether the intended recipient is not a human rights violator. And here I can cover the aspects in terms of international human rights law, as well as international humanitarian law, in this case being the law of armed conflict. And a case in point is essentially what currently is happening between Russia and the Ukraine. The third criteria that is being looked at whenever there are evaluations of applications is what effect would this transaction be or have on the regional dynamics, where the intention of the Act is to minimize the accumulation of destabilization in a region, which therefore then means, as part of evaluating the application, the committee must satisfy itself that the country in question that in all likelihood would receive South African material would not contribute to this destabilization in that region. The committee also must satisfy itself that the risk of diversion is either non-existent or low. In the event it is not low, what actually would then be mitigating factors that would count favorably for the application to be considered? Very often that actually becomes a question of what the intelligence sources indicate to us what the risk of diversion is. And the risk is not only limited to non-state actors, but of late, we also find that some state actors are also in violation where they are indirectly contributing to the proliferation of arms. The committee also has to satisfy itself that the transactions satisfy or would contribute to the national interest of South Africa. In the case of security, the committee must satisfy itself that the material that is going to be transferred would not be used against our own forces wherever they would be deployed. And on a political basis, we then have to check whether this actually contributes positively to our political positions as relates to the geopolitics in the world. And thirdly, to actually say or evaluate what the value of the permit may be in terms of the economic benefits. However, the committee is mindful that the value of the permit may not sway the sovereign principles, and in this case, those that are found in our Bill of Rights as per our Constitution. Next slide, please. This is an indication of a process that is undertaken every time there is an application that is lodged with the Secretariat, where the Secretariat, having received the application, then creates bundles that it then sends to the review departments. Those are the departments that I spoke to earlier on when I indicated that they are state security, DERCO, the SAPS, and the DTI. And these review departments then peruse and evaluate the criteria as indicated both in section 15 and other policy considerations that vest with the department, such that we then have the applications sent back in terms of when they are being supported by the entities that constitute the scrutiny committee. And when the applications are being supported, we then have to scrutinize in order to formulate and build a consensus of what would constitute a recommendation or a non-recommendation. Having done that, the scrutiny committee, the application then proceeds to where the NCACC has to then decide. Based on the recommendations of the scrutiny committee, the NCACC may either approve the application or deny the application if it deems it necessary or correct under the circumstances, or would actually call for the application to be held over under consideration in order to deal with aspects of matters that were not satisfactory to the committee at the time when this application served, which would then mean that application that is placed under consideration would require a fresh report that then addresses aspects that the committee may have raised in order to then increase the eligibility of that application for consideration. The committee having decided or having approved or denied or had the application held over, the Secretariat then proceeds to execute the decision of the NCACC by issuing the relevant permits or informing the applicant that the application has been denied and these were the reasons. Next slide, please. I think this slide actually indicates the constituent parts of the approval process. To the extreme left, there's an indicator of a registration permit, which is essentially what is required when an entity must be in good standing with the NCACC. And this is essentially the license to trade. Having obtained a registration permit, the entity then must apply to actually obtain a marketing permit. Marketing permit is very much tailored to the registration permit in that you can only market that for which you are registered. Having both the registration permit and the marketing permit then enables the entity so registered under the Act to then proceed to the subsequent application processes where the applicant may then, based on having marketed their products and services, then apply to actually obtain a contracting permit. So these gates are actually represented here by this red star. Once the committee has then actually evaluated and approved that the applicant may be issued with a contracting permit, that entity then actually begins the process of contracting in order to fulfill the solutions that it may have marketed to the prospective clients. The applicant then has to come back to the NCACC, apply for an export permit. And very often this is where I think the committee has been made aware of some of the challenges that are there, where the applicants are of the view that having been granted a contracting permit, they ordinarily or automatically should be given an export permit. However, in keeping with Section 15 considerations, between the stages of contracting permit and when an application is floated for an export permit, if the conditions that were there when the committee considered the contracting permit are either no longer there or have degraded, the committee should be actually circumspect not to authorize such an export permit, because it would be flying in the face of the criteria as set in Section 15. There is also a representation here of various applications that the applicant who is in possession of a registration permit and a marketing permit, which is represented on the extreme left, may then apply for the domestic transfer authorization. This isn't the case where between the two entities that are in contiguous borders of South Africa, there is or needs to be an exchange of that product or those products. This could be for further processing, but it could also be for integration or for destruction. There is also a import permit that an entity that is duly registered may apply for as well. Again, this is actually happening internally without any requirement for export. And in instances where countries are landlocked, then the applicant may apply for a conveyance permit. Very often, the applicant would do this through entities that are registered under the NCACC, because an applicant, or rather the end destination, may be a country, for instance, Zimbabwe, which is landlocked and all that. Therefore, it is the logistics managers, freight forwarders, that are the ones who apply on behalf of those clients, but under our domestic law, in order to then be issued with a conveyance permit. Next slide, please. I then present the Q4 statistics for 2022. We have processed 77 registration certificates, 4 marketing permits, and under contracting permits, 39 were authorized and issued. There were no denials, and the total value of these contracts that were authorized was 5.7 billion rands, and these were to 25 countries. And then for export munitions, There were 161 permits that were authorized. And here I beg the indulgence of the committee that the total value of exports was actually 457 million, that's not 2.45 billion. And these were to 39 countries. The next is the import permit statistics. There were 49 permits that were authorized and issued, amounting to 146.5 million rands, and the importations being from 16 countries. And in this case, there was only one conveyance permit issued. And then we had exports, which are not munitions, but dual use goods and technology. And the permits there were 23 authorized, and the value of those exports were 212.7 million rands, and the exports being to 11 countries. And then looking at the annual permits, or statistics rather, there were 196 registration certificates that were issued in 2022, with 16 marketing permits, and the contracting value for permits was 130, that amounted to 21.6 billion rands, and that is to 54 countries. The export in terms of munitions was 501 permits that had a value of 1.38 billion rands to 61 countries. Next slide, please. The imports were then 225 permits issued with a value of 301.9 million, and the total countries imported from were 25. The conveyance numbers were 3 authorized, and the dual export was 122 permits with a total export value of 595.9 million rands. And the total number of countries exported to was 21. Next slide, please. I then present to you, committee, the quarter-on-quarter at a glance of Q4 for exports with munitions, where Q4 was 1.383 billion, and this as compared to the same period in 2021 indicates a positive trend where the exports were almost as much and they were actually exported to 61 countries. Next slide, please. For imports, same approach was 146.5 million rands imported from 49 countries, 49 permits, and from 16 countries. And the positive trend there being the amount is far larger than we had in 2021. Or at the time in 2021, we had more import permits issued. Next slide, please. The summative at a glance for exports is indicated where Q1 is compared to Q1 of 2021. 2022 was a positive one with lesser permits though. Q2 was lesser than in 2022 than 2021, although Q2 of 2022 had more permits issued, so it is actually a reduction. Q3 and Q4 were positive in 2022 as compared to Q3 and Q4 of 2021 in terms of export values. Next slide, please. And the quarterly summative at a glance for munitions indicates that Q1 and Q2 were positive as compared to the same period in 2021. Yet Q3 and Q4 of 2022 had a negative trend as compared to 2021 for both Q3 and Q4. Next slide, please. And then the annual as indicated was 1.3 billion as compared to 600 in 2021, and the trend is a positive one, hence the green indicator. Next slide. The same annual at a glance, imports munitions 301.9 million rands as compared to 6.7 million of 2021. And this is a very significant positive trend of 2022. Next slide, please. Here, committee, I'm just introducing this slide, and I call it demystifying the NCACC approvals. I am presenting this here, committee, based on some of the experiences where some of the committee members are being approached by industry, where industry complains with, and they would say the NCACC either is not sitting, or they would say the NCACC is not actually approving my exports. On the extreme left, an entity that is registered under the NCACC is practically at zero approval. The only thing it has is the license to trade, as well as a marketing permit to can market its products and services. It is unless and until the entity has applied to the NCACC for a contracting permit that then it scales the represented here by this star, the red star, to then be issued with a contracting permit. And this then is essentially a license to can contract. It is not an export. And the committee approves this contracting permit. It then moves the applicant from a zero consideration of approval to something around about 50%. It is upon an application and approval by the NCACC to then can export that an entity registered under the Act may then actually say they have 100% approval to export. I have used here a significant indicator of a solid red line that indicates that until the entity has applied and actually has a contracting permit, it is not in a position to can apply for an export permit. And this has been the case where even some unions have been approached now where the NCACC is being made to be impacting negatively, or being made to be seen to be impacting negatively on the fortunes of such entities when the entities do not or have not been issued with a contracting permit, which therefore then says they are not in a position to can export until they have been issued with a contracting permit. I will not belabor this, but I think this was very key that I should help to demystify the stages at which what happens when an application reaches the NCACC and is being processed through by the various entities, the approval process of the NCACC. Next slide, please. I also, based on experiences and interactions that I have had, also designed this slide, which I call a section 16 and 17 explainer. These are provisions that are in the NCACC Act. These are provisions that are known by the applicant, and these are actually as a disposal of the applicants in order for them to be compliant. Section 16 of the NCACC Act requires that if an entity which is in South Africa has now been issued with an export permit, as it plans to export, it must also be in possession of an end user certificate that will be provided by the prospective recipient of South African products and or services. This is a requirement in terms of section 16. However, Section 17 was introduced in the amendments in 2012, where it was deemed necessary to enable an applicant that they may apply to actually indicate to the NCACC that as I apply, I will eventually alienate that which I will have received from South Africa. I therefore, in terms of Section 17, exercise my right to say the NCACC or South Africa should consent to this alienation. In that case, the sovereign entity that actually exports, in this case, to country X in terms of Section 17, should or must have a reasonable expectation to receive an EUC, in this case, from country X. However, when the alienation has to happen, it is that country, in this case, country X, that then plans or carries on with its exports of the nation and must or should have a reasonable expectation to receive an EUC from that country, in this case being country Y. The reporting function of South Africa to all the entities for transparency reporting that it needs to report to in terms of its obligations under the treaties and conventions extends only on the transaction that is between, in this case, South Africa and country X in terms of Section 17. However, the obligation and transparency to report vests now with country X as regards the further alienation of South African material. I don't know if it is actually making this clearer and also useful for the industry in terms of using the enablers that are there in the legislation to get their business going on a sustainable basis. Next slide, please. This slide, I think, is just a reminder of what we've covered in the past, and it relates to the entities that may or must produce reports that are used for decision support for the NCACC, emanate from DERCO, SSA, and Defense Intelligence, and no other source. And they're very cardinal in that process. That being the case, when the Secretariat has received these reports, it processes them to become the focal points of discussion at scrutiny committee in order to arrive at a recommendation, whether to support an approval or a denial or a placement under consideration. And in that case, when there is consensus and there is a recommendation, the application then moves to the next stage of approval, where the NCACC decides. The committee would recall that the decision then becomes an approval or a holdover or a denial. Next slide, please. I have also illustrated what I've said in the previous slides, again, to illustrate the importance and the processing of decisions by the NCACC, especially when it comes to the assessment of risk. To the extreme in red is the criteria of Section 50 of the Act, followed by, in the next column, the entities that are by law, the ones that must compile reports that inform the NCACC in terms of its decision-making process. And when the review status of these applications enjoys the support of DERCO, SSA, and Defense Intelligence, the scrutiny committee then assumes a position, recommends such applications because there is consensus. In other words, that application then enjoys the green part of the progression of the.
May I ask that you quicken up the speed of delivery?
Okay.
And by 8, I request that by 8 you'll be done.
Okay, I shall do so. And the next then becomes the same application. If it does not enjoy support from either of the 3, it then would have that amber where there is no support. Therefore, there is no consensus, and therefore, the recommendation by the scrutiny committee to NCACC becomes either a denial or the placement under consideration. Next slide. Here, I think I'll just cover the aspect that relates to the types of reports. We deal with reports that are specific to the permits at the time of application, and this happens on a monthly basis. Where the committee is of the view that a further diagnosis or further information should be provided, the head of secretariat then calls for a country profile regarding the country in question in order to get a better exposition of what happens. In the event the country profile has also been provided and there is a shift in terms of the matters that are pertinent to the country, the head of secretariat can then also call for a dynamic report that then gives an indicator of the implications of the shift that would have happened. Next slide, please. I think here I'll just quickly go through. This is just an indicator of the categories that are there in terms of the UN register. I think topical here is very often I've spoken in the past about ACC saying they would consider approving, for instance, a certain category, but not another category. And very often when the NCACC says it may not, for that specific country, approve at that time, category A and B, it actually therefore means anything else that is not category A and B may be approved the NCACC, and it does actually approve that. And this would be your category C, D, E, and F. Next slide, please. Next slide. I think this is just a summation of where we are in terms of IT. The IT implementation testing still continues. Training and archiving is continuing. There needs to be further work where we could actually quicken and hasten and cover more ground. We've lost some ground because of some of the issues that were there. There was an amount that was outstanding, and the service provider was not actually very energetic in terms of supporting us. But the payment was done now in March, and we should be able to then move apace in order to actually get going. I must inform the committee that due to load shedding, the system shows its age now, the old system, the current system in other words. It takes longer to reboot, and also having reboot, reboot, the system availability factor tends to be low, which is actually quite worrying. However, we are looking at how best we can manage this, but we have to try and move on to the new system. Or the new system also is attracting higher maintenance costs, but those are necessary and have to be budgeted for. Next slide. Here it is just a summation of the litigation that the committee is aware of. That was open secret, and open secrets and the laws for human rights, having taken the NCACC to court on the basis of what is the role of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the UAE in Yemen. The committee would recall that the matter at the last time was at case management and still is at case management and has not moved forward. The sum total of this says that Part 1 or A still stands where the NCACC is in default of judgment with a cost order. However, the part 2, which is for the review of permits, has not moved forward. Next slide. During Q3, I introduced another matter related to further litigation, and this is on the basis of Myanmar. The NCACC still has taken a decision that it will not approve applications for Myanmar. At that time, it was category A and B, and not C and other categories. And based on commercial and legal conditions of product support, there were 3 radios that had actually become defunct and had to be replaced as part of the commercial agreement. And when those 3 were sent through to Myanmar and reflected on our statistics, the Southern Africa Litigation Trust Center launched a court process where they were seeking to review those applications. The matter has not moved forward. However, we actually stand having instructed senior counsel through the Office of the State Attorney to defend the matter. Next slide, please. Our human resources situation is improving. Of the 33 planned vacancies, only 16 were filled, and we had 3 attrition that made us to actually go down to 13. But we are in the process of actually closing or clawing back the 3 posts because they are vacant and funded, and adverts are out in order to actually close those. However, we've also identified 7 other vacant and unfunded posts that are being coded, and hopefully they will be funded and be filled in the forthcoming financial year in order to improve the staff complement of the secretariat. Next slide, please. We have had an engagement with the industry where we went in person, being the staff complement of the secretariat, to familiarize ourselves with the products and the entities that are in the Durban KZN area, as well as Cape Town, Western Cape. And it was actually a very successful visit. This was arranged by the AMD, which is the Industry Association. And the discussions that were held there were quite illuminating, as well as informative in terms of future processes that actually will be embarked upon by the NCACC in order to actually manage and effectively help the sustainable development of the defense industry. I think this is the end of my presentation, Chair, Ministers, and all committee members.
Thank you very much for that. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you very much. I don't know, colleagues, the report is tabled. Let's thank Advocate Jele for an elaborate and informative report. Are there any questions, colleagues?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay, Mr. Murray, you are the only one.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Advocate Jele, for a very comprehensive report. It's obviously a very high-level report and no details. So if you would allow me, I would just like to ask a few more detailed questions. The one thing, Chair, that I would still love to see at one stage is a comparison of actual imports and exports versus the approval of permits, because not necessarily all approvals will be translated into actual exports and actual export values, and the same with imports as well. So it might be less than what was approved. I know that NCACC don't deal with that actual values and figures. That is more trade and industry and customs. So, but I would still like at one stage, like to see that comparison. And I don't know whether Wilhelm can maybe get in touch with trade and industry and customs and excise to just see whether we can get that comparison. That'll be very interesting to see, because those figures will give us a figure in a specific financial year. And we know that some of the approvals from the NCACC might roll over into another year, and all might not be in that specific year. Be that as it may, but if that will be possible, it'll be great. Advocate Jele, I just want to put the next two questions, and I actually know the answers, but I need to just put it on record. Was there any import applications from Russia and Belarus other than the 2019 and 2020 permit approvals? We know that those were basically the ammunition that was the controversial visit of the Lady R to Simonstown, and that correlates with that 2019 and 2020 permits. But were there any other that you have considered and received applications and permits issued? And then the same on exports permits to Russia and Belarus, whether there were any export permits applications received and any permits issued on that. Just to come back to what you have quite good explained with that charts of how the application process work. And as you've rightfully said, the problem seems to be with category category A and category B applications, where there might be reasons why you can't approve a permit. Sometimes you will deny it, and sometimes you will put it on a hold. I know that there seems to be problems again with UAE and Saudi Arabia, and it seems now with Turkey and Poland there seems to be challenges as well. And I know that we intend to visit Turkey, so we might be confronted by that, and whether you can share with us information on those countries that might be the reasons to either call it red flagging or put those permit applications on a hold. So whether you can share some of that reasons and intel information. And then you have quite well explained the whole process on the end user certificate. And I just want to ask, I mean, all of us accepted and support the fact that end user certificate must be in place, and you can enforce, the powers from the end user certificate. Now, my question is whether you have called on those end user certificates in any of these countries of concern, and I mean, if so, was there any confirmatory information that you have received for that? And if not, why haven't you called on that? Then I also want to ask you, when you consider and liaise with AMD especially, and we know that some of them are to a very, very large extent dependent on exports, because the South African National Defence Force, as their historical main supplier, is not buying that much munitions as they would like, so they must export. Now, whether whether you have liaised with them in terms of what they experience as damaging to their business prospects. You have indicated to even trade unions that has approached you, and obviously that sounds like it is damaging their work prospects. Now, have you, when you decide on putting something on hold or deny, do you communicate with the applicant so that they know exactly that, listen, you have got a class A or B application to, for instance, Poland or Turkey. We are putting on hold for example, we suspect that they will sell that products onto Ukraine or to Russia, which will be used then in a conflict zone. Do you communicate that kind of information with the applicant so that they know where they stand? And then my last question is, so if you can just elaborate on that. And then I want to ask on the ICT, you will recall that there's probably a year ago or even more, where there was an indication of a dual process, where the applications can be done on a dual process by hand and electronically. And what I gather from tonight is that that process is still in the testing phase. So I mean, how can I find that a bit concerning that after so long, that ICT process has not been completed. Is that largely due to that 4 million rand that was unpaid and that you can now pay? And will that then be resolved so that that dual process, or hopefully a process where everything can be done online, whether that can be enhanced? And just for your information, I normally liaise with the industry, but also with AMD. So thank you very much, and I would look forward to your thorough answers. Thank you very much.
Right. That was the only hand. May I invite you, Bob Jede, to deal with to comment or address the comments by Mr. Murray.
Okay. Thank you, Chairperson. I've been making copious notes here
Chair.
in order to...
Chair.
Yes, sir. Was that Tabo?
Yes, it's myself, Chair.
Yes, but Ebo.
I'm just worried about the number of questions raised by Honorable Murray and the responses that we might get. I'm just want to caution that where there's a level of confidentiality about some of this transaction, how do we then ensure that we don't divulge as much information as it might impact negatively on the operations of the Defence Force? Because some of these questions that are raised by Honorable Murray are directly related to some of those.
Yes, you are right, Honorable Motle. Advocate Zondo, Advocate Jele is not compelled to reveal the protected information. So over to you.
Chairperson, I just want to say, if we need to, if there's information that can only be revealed in a closed session, no problem. We, then maybe we can some way fit that in. Well,
remember, this is a contract between parties that are not party to this discussion. And if the contracting parties agree that this information will be kept confidential, how on earth can we can we remove the seal?
I accept that, although I mean I don't want to know any party's name. Only country.
No. If remember, they deal with us because of the understanding that we will try and keep the information they supply with us on the confidential basis confidential. If someone who enters into that agreement with you now suddenly learns that you have revealed the information, you have in actual fact broken you've broken trust. It doesn't matter whether the names were there or were not there, but you did what was not supposed to be done in the first place. But Advocate Jele deals with these matters. She would treat them with care, with the necessary care. Over to Advocate Jele.
Okay, it is true. I was actually going to respond
Mr.
to those
Ryder,
that
sorry, Mr. Ryder, is your hand up? I'm sorry, Advocate Jele.
Yeah, good evening, Chairperson, and my apologies for doing that to you. I'm a little out of breath. I've just run up the stairs back to my office. Our sitting has just ended and I was debating, and I apologize for doing this to Advocate Jele and for interrupting the meeting, which I have not been following. But I do have a question that I'd like to pose, if I may, if the Chair will allow it.
But you were not in the meeting when the presentation was delivered. What if the question you are asking was covered in the presentation?
Yeah, well, I was through no fault of my own not permitted to or not able to attend. So if it was covered, then I would expect to be referred back to a YouTube video, which I'll happily do.
Yeah, yeah. Well, look, I will let you ask the question, but I'm always hesitant to allow a person to enter into a discussion when he was not present when the input was made. But anyway, I will still allow you.
Chair, thank you very much. My apologies. I think you're aware of the conflicting obligations, which I did warn about before the meeting. So thank you. My question is fairly simple. It relates just to the certificates that were issued and certificates declined in the past quarter. And just to get an indication of what additional countries were added to the list of countries recently that we are not dealing with, because I believe some certificates for Poland, exports to Poland were not permitted, and perhaps if I can get some reasons around why they were added to the list, or any other countries as well. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, that's fine. No, thank you so much. Advocate Jele, those were the comments from the colleagues. Over to you.
Thank you, Chairperson and committee members. I'll begin with the exports, or rather exports and imports, including the contracting permit reports. South Africa reports to the UN both the Convents Arms Register as well as the ATT. For exports and imports, it is actuals. It is only on contracting that we are actually reporting even to Parliament on that which was authorized. The committee would recall that the authorization to contract enables an entity registered under the NCACC Act to then begin with contracting. I'm aware that very often the industry,
no,
by the
I
time
think
they actually,
I think Advocate Jele, I think you've answered the question
yes,
without repeating yourself, because what you are going to say now, not only that you will be repeating what you said today, but you'll also be repeating things you've been saying over time. unless it's a new information.
True. No, it's not.
Okay.
Import
You may,
exports are
you
always
may
on
then deal with other
actuals.
questions.
Okay. The issue of category A or B, which was actually asked earlier on, relates to the three entities that give us intelligence reports. When they indicate to us what they flag and why they flag that, I have to formulate that and present it to the NCACC, who then makes a decision based on that. In entities that actually have not actually had their applications approved, meaning under consideration, we write to them indicating to them that the application is still under consideration. It might be called comfort, but what it says is the committee deems it necessary to give that application a chance for reconsideration, hence a calling for fresh reports for the subsequent meeting, wherein fresh data or information shall then be presented in support or as a detraction towards the very same applications. And that becomes a matter arising all the time at all NCACC meetings when it comes to applications that were held back or kept under consideration. I hope that clarifies the matter. There are no countries of concern that the NCACC compiles, but the NCACC applies section 15 to raise things that are concerning that then militate against the NCACC considering an approval. Because if, for instance, an application is serving and the NCACC picks information that indicates that should they approve that application, it is going to contribute to the destabilization of a region, it then would take a decision that says it is not prudent to authorize it. I can only hope that this actually answers the questions that have been asked. We do communicate with applicants when the applications have not been successful or placed under consideration. But my experience is that when you indicate that to the entities that are registered, they actually do not want to accept it. It's almost like the NCACC actually receives applications in order not to apply its mind, but to approve, which is not the case. The NCACC must apply section 15 in order to arrive at a determination whether such applications are approvable or not. I will not speak directly on country specifics. Safe to say that when there is an indication in an application based on the criteria that is in section 15, such that the NCACC is not in a position to approve, it then does so, and the Secretariat informs the entity that has actually applied that that application was not successful or is under consideration. I think that's about the long and short of what I can share. It would be perhaps useful that we have a closed session if needed to address some of the matters that we actually raised.
Okay. Now I think we have dealt with the issues. Save the issues that you said you are protected. I'm sure you dealt with them in that order, in that way.
Yeah. Yes, we do.
All right. So thank you so much. So leave it at that for now, and it remains for me, Advocate, to thank you for honoring your appointment with us and giving us. Yes, Mr. Moran.
Just on the ICT question and the online application process, there was no response to that.
Okay, my apologies.
Okay.
I did not pick that up. Over to Advocate Jenny.
I would not actually place the lack of progress, the amounts that were outstanding, but to actually say the processes that we've undertaken are also impacted negatively, and I'm not making an excuse here, by load shedding. So very often, most of the time we use is to recover time lost in processing applications that are dearly required by the countries, companies that wish or want to actually export. So we put a lot of effort in there. And sometimes we get to the detriment of both user acceptance testing as well as certification of the system. But we are very close to actually getting onto the new system, because the old system, as I've indicated, is essentially on its last legs. Hence, every time after you actually have had load shedding, when you boot up the system, it takes longer to boot, and then the availability of the system, the factor is quite low. So it actually says that we're treading on a thin line on the old system without need to migrate. Because the last thing probably that we all need is where the old system has collapsed and the new system cannot spew even one permit. It will be a disaster for the industry. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Okay, so leave it at that for now. And thank you very much for the presentation. You are welcome to exit at any time when you wish to do so. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I shall exit, Chairperson. Thank you very much for the invitation. And also I'm bidding Minister Modise good evening.
Okay, no, thanks, Gebudi. Okay. Now, can we then quickly move to the next item, the presentation of the two letters of deployment. Minister, we're presenting those two letters. I don't know who is in the DOD to support the minister in presenting the letters.
Chair, I just reconnected. I hope CJ Ops is still on.
CJ Ops.
Yes, good evening, Minister, and good evening to the honorable members of the committee. Yes, I am online. I just wish to take the chance to apologize for Dr. Kamete, the acting SecDef. She was connected, but she just told me now that she is now encountering load shedding in her area. I submit.
Okay. Thank you very much. Are you gonna take us through the present on the letters, Chief Jones?
Yes, Chair, it's positive.
Thank you very much. Over to you, sir.
Honorable Chair and honorable members, the President, as the Commander-in-Chief of the South African National Defence Force, has authorized the deployment of the SANDF force elements under Operation Prosper as in support of the SAPS for the whole of government effort, where the JCPS cluster or the security cluster of government saw the need that the national protest led by the EFF involving other stakeholders, that there was a need for it to be conducted in a safe and secure environment. The JCPS then gave the decision to the net joints, which then went through the planning process. and the SANDF was requested to also deploy force elements with the purpose of protection and safeguarding of national key points and critical infrastructure in order to relieve the SAPS from those static deployment, and to be able to go and do the necessary policing to ensure a safe and secure environment for the conducting of the national protest. The President duly, within his powers as according to the Constitution, employed the employment as from the 17th of March till the 17th of April 2023, with the estimated expenditure of 166,562,000. That's all, Chair, if I may stop there. With a total number of personnel authorized was 3,474, Chair. I submit.
Thank you very much. Can you do the second presentation on the ministerial deployment? We'll then take the discussion on both of them.
Thank you, Chair. The Minister of Defense and Military Veterans was approached by the Minister of Health and requested to avail the services of the SANDF in support of other government departments, which is the Department of Health, as we are aware that the Department of Health was experiencing strike by the public service unions, many of them in the health sector, and the Minister of Health indicated that some of the hospitals were really in a dire need because their members were on strike and other members were prevented to go and do their work in hospitals. And to save lives, there was a request for the SANDF medical health personnel to assist, and were then deployed with the authority of the Ministry of Defense and Military Veterans, according to the powers vested in her. We deployed a number of nurses, health professionals to assist in Northwest, Gauteng, and KZN hospitals. The total employment was for a period of from the 8th of March till the 30th of March, with the employment of 2,800 members, and for with the estimated expenditure to the deployment of 83,264,000. I submit, Chair.
Okay, colleagues, thank you very much. Thank you very much, General, for the presentation. Colleagues, the matter, the two letters are on the table for comments. Let's start with the first, or maybe let's deal with them interchangeably. Start with the first and then move to the second one. And they will be responded in the same manner as well. Over to you, Mr. Murray.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, CG Ops and Minister. First, Chairperson, if I can start with the presidential authorization letter. I think that based on our experience in KZN in 2021, we know that when there's a possible indication of a threat to the integrity of the country and the safety of our people, that in exceptional cases, then we are in support of the deployment or the employment of the SANDF. I think they have done us proud. I think they were much, much better prepared. Although they've done a great job in 2021, I think they've even done better. And I think in terms of equipment was in much better condition and preparations. And I think that has contributed significantly to the fact that there was no or very low levels of unruliness. So compliments to them, to CJ Ops and our soldiers. They have actually done us proud. On the letter of the president, I think this one is an excellent example, I think, of the commitment that we've received from the president. And I think that we cannot complain at all. If you look at the letter of the president, then you will see it is dated the 17th. It is for the period 17th of March to the 17th of April, with the amount indicated. So I cannot find fault with that at all. My question on that is, we know what the employment authorization was. Do we know what the extent is to what they are still on standby, and how many were actually deployed versus the employment authorization? Just on that one. So just that we can get an idea of how many from those that were put on standby was actually deployed and are still deployed. On the letter of the minister, we also know that that is in terms of the act, so we don't question that at all. My question in terms of the times and the dates, you will see that the letter is dated the 13th of March. It is for a period preceding that date, from 8th of March until the 30th of March, and which we have only received on the 20th of March. Very late. So there's just, whilst the dates on the presidential letter is exemplary, I just find the questions why it seems like the letter was dated after the authorization of the employment for that period, and why it took a little bit of time when it came to us in Parliament. Then also in terms of that letter, if I can just get an indication of how many of the soldiers or the employees were actually deployed in assistance of health and the Department of Health. Yeah, Chairperson. And then just on that one, seeing that next week is the 30th of March, do we see that one being extended, or will that be terminated on the 30th of March? So in other words, has the situation been normalized to such an extent that can be terminated? Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Murray. Honorable Mafanya and Honorable Ryder.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I agree with Mr. Murray when there's a need for, including the government itself, when there's a need for deployment of soldiers in emergency situations. But that also is also informed by the information that they receive from the intelligence. But in this case, the take is that the information that they acted on is that there was going to be unrest, that as Mr. Murray is saying, that there may have been a situation that may look like, or may be, like KZN as well as Gauteng, July riots that happened. But the information that they acted upon was on the basis of premeditated approach to the way they emphasize the things that would pan out, in particular on the shutdown issue. Now, my question is that, do you still stand by that there was going to be unrest, taking into consideration that how the shutdown panned itself out? Because there were no unrest, there was no looting as envisaged by the information that you received. So the question is that whenever decisions are taken by the president, including the minister, what informs such informations? Can you, in a way of doing things, believe that you can always be correct in your assessment of issues? And what if you are wrong? Because in most cases, we only receive letters when deployments are done. And the engagements, maybe they are happening because the chair and other leaders from the ministry are the one who are sitting there. Is the chair making decisions for all of us? Because we always engage after the effect with the letters of the president. So what influence we have in terms of some of the deployments that happen? Because we are only told that X number of soldiers are going to be deployed. And again, on the issue of the subs, is that there are nurses that were deployed, but it was to be because it became an issue of the how, where they actually informed the ministry that there are going to be protests. And then from where I sit is that, yes, we congratulate the nurses, the doctors that were provided to assist in that field. But the reality is that how do we combat that? How do we stop these things from happening? Because from time to time, we find our soldiers being abused as a result of saying that the police, I have asked whether they have enough sufficient resources to do that themselves. And then now, are we going to allow every letter that comes from the Minister of Police to be looking for an assistance on the basis of the information they get and at times being misplaced information, because the intelligence from the police as well as the should be in the forefront to say, yes, we had to go to national key points because there was a threat there. But we would not have that kind of information that can actually give us more clarity, because going forward, some of these things are going to happen. Are we going to use the SANDF budget to mitigate against incompetences of certain ministries? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mafanya. Over to you, Mr. Reda.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chairman. Yeah, so I think Mr. Marais has covered all the technical aspects of it. I think that the South African National Defence Force has conducted themselves extremely well. I'm afraid that Mr. Mafanya is speaking from a slightly misguided point of view in my view, because where there are threats made, then one should expect that your threats get met with a concomitant response. The reality, Chairperson, is that I must be honest and say that I think that the time for employment of the police alongside the Defence Force alongside the police inside our borders should really be over by now. And I do think that the police should be upping their game a little bit and ensuring that they are able to control and deal with these type of things. I think it's long overdue that the South African Police Service did what they're supposed to be doing without having to call on the Defence Force every time. But I do want to say that I thought that it was a well-executed operation, well done to the Defence Force. More so on the case with the nurses and medical personnel that stepped into the breach that was left by striking workers. And I do think that I personally was very proud to see South African Medical Services involved there. I think that, I'd just like to voice my own thanks to them, because they really filled the breach when it was necessary and they saved lives. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Reda. Mr. Muntle.
All right. Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity. Maybe we must get clarity of the interpretation of what the Act says in terms of the President deploying and how that should be communicated with Parliament. Because if if my memory serves me well, it doesn't say the president must seek approval of Parliament through the committee. But if Chair, anyone is in position of that, can clarify us so that certain questions do not resurface. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mutle. Is any other hand? Mutsumai. Oh, it's not on the platform.
Motapo.
All right. Oh, Ms. Motapo, my apologies.
Just for late.
Yes, over to you.
Hello.
Yes, over to you. You can talk.
Yes. I was saying, Chair, I want to align myself with what Honorable Mute have just said in terms of legislation and where is the place what the president is entitled to do. So my
It looks as though
her line is bad.
Yeah,
yes, her line
very
is
bad.
terrible.
Very bad.
It's very bad, and we can't hear her now. But I understood her to be agreeing with Honorable Tabu that we'll need to be reminded as to under what conditions the president does, or whether the president, must seek permission of Parliament before he deploys
Chairperson,
the SNDF.
may I comment on that? Because I think the
Yes,
act
please.
is very clear that the president don't need to seek approval prior to authorization of deployment. The only thing that the president must do, where there's an indication of reasonable time, and you will recall the time that we have had the state law advisors and the legal advisors of Parliament. Also, that we had a whole discussion and a debate on that, and I know that there was not total agreement in terms of what is a reasonable time, but I think all that I'm saying is that the president's letter, I think, was exemplary. It was fantastic, and the times was absolutely superb. So I think there can be no complaints whatsoever in terms of the legal position of the president. He has fully acted in his rights, and I think he was incredibly reasonable in terms of the times that he reported this to us. So that is
thank you very
my
much.
take on that. There's obviously a bit of a difference in terms of the ministerial letter, but in terms of the presidential letter, I think there should be no confusion whatsoever.
I think what you are saying that the president letter was prompt, or rather the information to Parliament was prompt.
Absolutely.
So that correct.
Absolutely.
So, and you were simply just raising a concern that there was a delay in the letter to Parliament from the minister.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, it's fine. I'm sure the colleagues will be able to deal with that. And but of course, the delay doesn't actually contaminate the deployment. It doesn't.
No.
Correct. Yes.
Not.
Chair, through you,
Chair, I think Honorable Ryder has also assisted the meeting by sharing the subsection 4
Chair,
of the said
Chair,
act,
Chair,
which
Chair.
will
Sorry,
clarify some of
sorry,
the
Mr.
questions
Mafanya, just
in
hold,
advance.
just hold, Mr.
We
Mafanya.
cannot just be interjecting the meeting without being identifying a person who must speak.
No, I
can't do
haven't,
that.
Mr.
And you
Mafanya, I
allowed it to
haven't
happen.
given you,
No, Chair.
Mr.
You
Mafanya,
allowed
I haven't given you the platform.
You allowed it to happen with Mare. Now we are allowing it to happen with Muche.
But you are
the meeting. Thank you.
Mr. Mafanya, I haven't given you the platform. So Chabo Mutle was still on the platform. I will come back to you, Mr. Mafanya, if you still want to come back on the same issue. Mr. Mutle?
Yeah, Chair, I was just saying, Honorable Ryder on the chat has assisted with the legislation in question, and it clarifies that within a stipulated time, the President must inform Parliament. He does not necessarily have to seek permission from Parliament to deploy, but he must inform Parliament of the reason that culminated in him taking that particular decision to deploy. Therefore, it dismisses some of the questions that were raised in terms of the President before deploying seeking permission of some sort from Parliament, or Parliament playing a certain role, an influential role on that decision prior to it being taken by the President. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, I agree with you that the security forces were on high alert. This time we're on high alert. You still want to come back, Mr. Mafanya, before I make my final point?
Yes, please.
All right.
Yes, please.
Okay.
I do not have a problem with the issue of the letter. Number one, I do not have a problem in the President deploying members of the SADF. The issue that I raise is it not open for abuse by the President to deploy, because his decisions cannot be questioned, number one. Number two, a case in point, we have a case of Central African Republic that has never reached a closure, because some of these things happen. The people, the families of those who died there, they still want answers. They never got answers, but there was an instruction given that the deployment must happen. So my question to that is, in as much as the President has got all the rights to do constitutionally what he pleases, it is not a problem. But the issue is it not open up for abuse by the state president, where he's got all, as a commander-in-chief of the army, to deploy them? By the time you question certain actions that may have been transgressed outside of this other issue that we are debating about, who is going to take accountability for that? Is it the committee? Is it the President himself and the ministry? And how do we explain it to the public out there? Thank you.
I thought the checks and balances, are built in the whole exercise. They are found in the Constitution itself, that after the President has deployed as employed soldiers, he must inform Parliament promptly of such a decision. And it's now upon Parliament to then, review the decision to deploy or to employ or deploy soldiers. If Parliament, after receiving the information, looked at the reasons for deployment, the numbers of soldiers deployed, as well as the cost of deployment, arrive at the conclusion that in fact the deployment was not necessary. The Parliament will then, take the decision. Now, this committee will look at that and then recommend to Parliament, look at all those things that I've just mentioned, and then recommend to Parliament that the deployment be stopped. But what the Constitution also says is that the decision of Parliament does not in any way, it doesn't, will not in any way invalidate the actual deployment itself, but it can stop it at a time when it takes that decision. But only Parliament can do that. I think that's the process we have been following all along as this committee. So we received the letters about last week, and we are meeting today. All what we need to say is whether we agree or we don't disagree, or we disagree with the deployment. If we agree, the deployment continues. If we disagree, so that would be our recommended. So at the end, I want us to then conclude and say which way are we deciding on the matter. I wanted to make my own contribution, having listened to all of you, that indeed this time around, the security forces of our country were on high alert. I think we must applaud them for ensuring that they took the actions that they took. They stopped looting. Let me say they prevented looting. They prevented the touching of properties and factories. And they also ensured that those who were protesting on the day do that under the environment that was protected, and so that their right to protest was also protected, given respect to. And also, they ensured that those who were wanted to go about their daily lives would do that without fear and unhindered. So I think there was a balancing act that we observed on that particular date. That today we speak of a peaceful protest. It's owing largely to the security forces and their presence, and was a prevention on its own. We thank for the decision that was taken. We, as this committee, we should recommend, from what I'm gathering, we are recommending to support the president on the action he took to deploy soldiers, and at the same time commend the manner in which our soldiers, the manner in which they behaved on this particular day. So would want to leave it at that for now. But before I close, okay, the second point is on the deployment by the minister to assist in the hospitals. or the health facilities that were affected by the strike, and that too, it's most welcomed. It's something that we need to do often so that our people will not, their rights will not be violated when other people are exercising their rights. We need to strike this balancing act. So we thank the minister for taking the decision that she took on the day, and also applaud all the soldiers that went all out to assist. And if, you know, the people who would have been placed, you know, under serious, you know, stressful conditions on the day or those days. With that, let me, the minister's hand is up. Let me invite the minister to do her own comment before we close this item.
Chair, you have covered me, but I must also say that I was expecting to get a report from you that on the deployment of the military nurses and the military personnel to hospitals and clinics, you may have received many letters, different dates. Because I remember that the first deployment was to a children's ward, which was babies, really newborn babies, neonatal ward. And we panicked, and even before, because I got that call in the middle of the night, we started trying to rush personnel to just go there and save the babies. So the request from provinces, especially from the teaching hospitals, because they were the target, did not come systematically, they came in trips and drabs. So finally we said to Minister of Health, maybe what you need to do is not ask us by, you know, province by province, is to look at a better coordinated effort so that we can deploy once. So I want to apologize for the dates that were not synchronized and all that. But when it comes to the lives, especially of the old people, of the very sick and of the children, I panicked. So if there is anything untoward, I want to apologize about that. And you're also right, Chairperson. Parliament has, if we have not reported, including the President, to Parliament, within 14 days, Parliament has the right to review, to look at the decision and to advise. Now, I don't know what happened in CAR, but I think that it is something that we are now going to be bound to not repeat, to look at what we need to do, and to absolutely, because we also don't want to risk the lives of the personnel. In some instances, you will also notice that even the movement of the medical personnel, we had to actually make sure that they also go with their own protection. And therefore, it wasn't as rapid as we wanted, but it actually went as far as the Eastern Cape, where we were even expected to provide even people who would sleep and clean. So we've been busy in this last period. We had to deal with a Nihao strike. We had to, on the other hand, also look at the promise of the 20th of May, of March. So dealing with two bits of actions that are ready to be in your face, having at the same time to look at the strategic infrastructure. You will also remember that we had also promised to look after all the strategic installations. So we had to deploy even at the airports. So we were all over, and I'm hoping that into the future, if any deployment that we get into is frivolous, Parliament has the right to say so. But you are right, Chairperson, Parliament does oversight. It cannot predetermine. It cannot preempt executive function. So the system sometimes is a little bit bad because you have to wait until we make a mistake before you wrap us into the knuckle. Because if you do it before, we can always then turn around and say, you made us make that mistake. But as I say, I think that we've learned a lot of lessons. I do think that we were watching the space, and yes, we were anticipating much more trouble than what took place. And yes, maybe we were preemptive also because the what was referred to as tools of the trade, some of them we actually arrived and dispersed before they were spread and havoc was done. So thank you very much for that. I think the defense will be pleased that for once we were not beaten up. We will carry the good wishes from the committees to them. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Minister. And the committee decision is that we are in support of the President as in relation to the deployment of soldiers for the 20th of August, so 20th of this month, but for the period that is stipulated in the letter of employment. We also are in agreement or in support of the decision that the minister took when she had to intervene at the request, intervene in the health facilities at the request of the Minister of Health to attend to the plight of the people who were going to be, stranded when the medical staff went on strike. With that, that will be our recommendation we make to Parliament. Is there no objection, colleagues?
Chair, note my objection. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So it's agreed to. All right. Thank you very much. So I think we can conclude this discussion on that note, and thank the General, the Chief Joint Ops, for the presentation on the good work that the soldiers did on those mentioned stipulated days. So we can then discharge you, Chief Joint Ops. In other words, you're welcome to exit the platform at any time you want to. And I think we've covered all the issues that require the presence of the Minister as well as the Deputy Minister. Am I correct, Nandipa?
Yes, Chair, you're correct. It's now only internal matters that are left, Chair.
That are left. Minister, we wish not to...
Asante sana ndo.
Come again, Minister?
Wasay asante sana.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Okay, no, thank you so much. Thank you, Minister. Until we meet again. Thanks to all the team that was in the meeting to support the Minister as well as the team in the Department of Defense or SNDF. All right, colleagues, let's then deal with the matter that is internal to us.
Up next, Chair, it's the annual report.
The annual report. Oh, please permit. So this is the annual report, colleagues. You just page 1, go to page 2. It's taken as read. Any correction? Page 3. Page 4. Page 5. Page 6. Page 7. Page 8. Page 9. Page 10. Page 11. 12, 13, 14. Yes, we are now at the end of the report. Colleagues, Velem, I did not see the closed meeting, was it in December? Or we decided we should not reflect it?
Chair, let me just double check.
I don't know. I think we had 2 closed meetings
There we go,
in
Chair.
the last.
It is included on the 2nd of December.
Or on the 2nd of December. Okay.
Yes.
No, my apologies. Colleagues, so that was the only thing I wanted to raise, which was an oversight on my part. Colleagues, I present this annual report. Is it accepted? Any mover?
Chair, I move for the adoption of the report.
Tabo moves for adoption.
Mothapo second, Chair.
Otapo seconds. The annual report on the activities of the Joint Standing Committee on Defense, January to December 2022, is adopted. Thank you so much, Velem and the team, for a good job. Now we're dealing with the minutes. How many sets?
Chair, we also have the report, the midterm review report from last week, Chair.
From last week, okay. Just present it.
Thank you, Chair and members. This report has been coming with the committee for quite a while. Just the background, Chair, we first distributed it last year already, and there were some required changes. Then we went through it again, some required changes. And in our previous, about a month ago, we presented further changes to this report, and there was members asked for the minister's office to be offered an opportunity to provide input if they so wish. We didn't receive any input, so we're presenting it today again as is for consideration. Just to highlight again to members that this is in terms of Joint Rule 120D that outlines that the Joint Standing Committee of Defence should conduct the strategic review of the SANDF midterm in the life of a particular parliament and submit recommendations to both houses on the transformation, integration, equity, morale, and defence readiness. Chair and members, I won't go through the whole report again because this has been with members for some while. Suffice to say, we stuck in this report with the outline as required in the rules, where we looked at we basically looked at an overview of each of these aspects: transformation, integration, equity, morale, and defense readiness. And then we looked at what the committee has done in terms of each of these aspects going forward. The report is with members. The only changes for transparency's sake that I wish to highlight have been editorial changes as I went through the report again. Just some small corrections. For example, the inclusion of a change of words, in addition to this sentence here, it says these concerns are aggravated given that in many instances the levels of reimbursements that the DoD receives for deployment are not fully aligned to the actual expenditure, or reimbursements received very late in a financial year, impacting on budgeting and planning. Just added to that sentence based on recent meetings as well. Again, another area in addition here, that just to point out that the whole oversight of compensation of employees and the expenditure of the department in that sense is still an ongoing area in need of oversight. A correction here about the Treasury acceding to the PC's PRRR requests. And here's some just some grammatical, also some inclusion of dates as at December 22 and by December 22 to make the report a bit more timely. And in addition here, that at observation number 9, where the committee acknowledges that while the defence allocation may not be sufficient, there is misalignment of defence spending, notably the increase in compensation of employees. And then just adding, the committee acknowledges that efforts are underway by the DoD to address this. Similarly, in the just some grammatical errors or changes in the recommendations where we previously said, for example, that the Houses of Parliament should consider a formal recommendation. This report will go to the Houses of Parliament. So if adopted, it does become a recommendation of the Houses of Parliament. Therefore, we changed the wording to just this committee recommends. And in number 3 as well, the committee encourages the DoD. So just those grammatical changes. Chair, I don't know if you want me to just briefly go through the recommendations, or should I hand back to you for consideration by members?
Oh, okay. Yes, you can go through the recommendations.
Thank you, Chair. So based on the prescripts of Joint Rule 120D, the Joint Standing Committee of Defence makes the following recommendations to the Houses of Parliament. So that is the requirement of, according to the rule, that this committee must report back to Parliament. Firstly, the JSCD makes the following undertakings to the House of Parliament in relation to Rule 120D, on which will be further reported at the end of the 6th Parliament in the committee's legacy report. The Joint Standing Committee of Defence will request the department to explain and possibly correct the population figures in the annual reports of 2018-19 and 2020-21. And it's unlikely that these figures were captured correctly. But this is according to what members pick up, where there's a discrepancy in the breakdown of personnel of the SANDF. It's probably just a misstatement of figures, but for transparency and correctness sake, it's requested that this be fixed. The Joint Standing Committee of Defence then will request from the DoD the figures of MSDS members retained in the SANDF and report in its legacy report how this and other reserve force recruitment efforts impact on force rejuvenation. Last, number 1C, the Joint Standing Committee of Defence will engage the DoD and relevant structures on the status of the SANDF morale, which this committee has recently done, but we can report back on that again in the end of the year when the committee has sufficiently dealt with the matter. Then the second recommendation, the committee recommends that the DoD enhance its efforts to address representativity regarding both race and gender. The Houses of Parliament should encourage the SANDF to increase its efforts to keep the force broadly representative of the people of South Africa, specifically through its intake of young South Africans, and that the SANDF should continue to report to the Houses of this matter through the Joint Standing Committee of Defence. Number 3, the committee encourages the DoD and Treasury to meet with a view to negotiating a solution to the unfunded organizational staff structure, and so that relates to the compensation of employees matter. And number 4, based on the concerns expressed by the Joint Standing Committee of Defence in this report regarding the state of defence readiness in South Africa, both Houses of Parliament should consider a debate on the status of the SANDF with specific focus on the following: the desired roles for the SANDF, the appropriate funding for the SANDF to fulfill its desired roles and functions, the reduced level of force readiness of the SANDF, specifically as it relates to its conventional role and its ability to fulfill its constitutional mandate, and lastly, the medium to long-term acquisition of and maintenance of prime mission equipment and logistical support equipment to meet the force's conventional operational requirements. So, Chair, that is the recommendations put forth based on the report for consideration by members. It is based on the discussions that this committee has had over the past 3 years. So I hand back to you for members to consider, and if any further changes are required, we can do so. Thank you, Chair.
No, thanks. Let's deal with the recommendation number 1. Comments on recommendation number 1. Doc, I'm looking at your 1A and thinking, how will it be possible to correct the figures of the report that was tabled, in 2018, for 2020, in 2028, 2019, as well as the 2020, 2021, because I think that's now water under the bridge. We can only say that in future they must, we note this and then say in future they must ensure that such a misstatement doesn't find its way in the annual report or something, because I don't know how we can withdraw that letter. So how we can withdraw the annual report, effect a thing, and retable it. I don't know. That's would be a technicality in my view that might be difficult to implement or correct. And then on the but I will, okay, colleagues, on 1A, B, C, any other issue? All right, let's go to 2.
Sorry, no, I had my hand up. Obviously, you can't see the hand.
Sorry, Mr. Reid. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so I'm talking from an accounting point of view, and that obviously is my history before I got into politics. Normally with an annual report, there is, if something in an historical annual report needs to be corrected, there'll just be a line included somewhere in the comment section. So it is possible to restate historical incorrections, but I think it's not something that I want to die in a ditch for. So I'm happy with what stands in front of us, but it would obviously be more correct to encourage the ministry to do a restatement in their next set of annual financials, or next annual report, sorry.
Okay. No, that's so just leave it at that for now, because it's already in Parliament, and if you want to correct a report that has already been tabled, you can only do it after you have withdrawn it, and then retabled it. So it's a process by which you can do it. I thought it's safer leaving it at this, in my view. I understand exactly what you're talking about. It's just that in corporate, it becomes the report of the corporate body, that it can deal with it as it deems fit. But in this case, it's a lengthy process that involves Parliament as well. Let's go to 2. And the 2 is fine. Any comment on 2? Let's go to 3.
Chairperson, I'm quiet because I've now rejoined, so I'm not sure where you are at the moment. Which point on the agenda?
We are on paragraph 2. We're dealing with the recommendations. It's a report. Is our midterm report.
Okay.
So, but you are focusing on the recommendations, yes.
Yeah.
So, okay. On 3, encourages the DOD to meet with the view to negotiating a solution to the. I don't think we should say an unfunded organizational structure. We can it's underfunded. I'm not too sure if it's we can. To avoid this to the underfunded, is the way of is that correct? The grammar is correct.
It is actually the same thing, because unfunded, we know what that means. Is that they haven't provided enough funds, so it is probably the same as underfunded, because we know that's that extra amount that they always are overspending on a year, and the Auditor General always refer to that as the reasons for the irregularities and the qualifications. So that.
Thank you very much. So underfunded.
Chair.
Yes, sir.
Chair, I'm
yes,
not sure. I'm not sure the manner in which we are approaching it. It will address the main challenge that the department is confronted with in terms of the ceiling imposed. because the main challenge,
I see.
the main challenge is the ceiling that is imposed. Because once that ceiling has been lifted, then sufficient resources, as and when they appropriate for the purpose of passing the budget, they will be made available to ensure that it covers a number agreed upon with the National Treasury. So the main challenge here is not underfunding, it's the ceiling.
Yeah.
Imposed. Thank you.
Yeah, I think Thabo is correct. I think negotiation with a view of reviewing the ceiling, imposed on the compensation of employees budget.
Same subject, and you can call it different things, but still the same. We know what that refers to.
No. Those are two different things. Those are two different things, Mr. Mare.
I know the ceiling, but because of the lower ceiling, there's a portion that is unfunded. So obviously, if you push up the ceiling, then you will have enough funding. If they lower the ceiling, then the problem becomes bigger in terms of how to fund that.
Yeah, it's just that we need to be specific, what is it that we are talking about. I hear you, but we need to be specific on what we are talking about, because the money is there. It's just that they can't use it to pay more on the COE. That is deemed irregular expenditure.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. Okay, I think it says me to reviewing the existing composition of employees, ceiling affecting the funding. Yes, I think it captured nicely. Thabo, you hear me?
No, yeah. I'm happy with the construction now.
Okay, thank you so much. Number 4. Number 4, A, B, C, and D. Colleagues,
Chair, if we have scrapped the Houses of Parliament with the committee, then we should do that consistently, because here it's also both Houses of Parliament. Okay, no, this is different.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah, but
that's fine.
But just remember that the NCOP has got no budget responsibility with regards to that. So if both houses should consider a debate on the status of the NCA, it can be done on both houses. It can be done.
I think it can be done, yes. All right, all right, colleagues, I now table the midterm report of the committee for adoption. Any mover?
I move, Chair, for the adoption.
Thabo moves for adoption.
With amendments. Yes.
Seconded.
Mutapo, second.
Matapo,
amendment.
Seconds. Thank you very much. So the report is now duly adopted. And it will then be sent to Parliament for as our report. All right, colleagues, the minutes, I think, is the last item. How many sets?
2 sets, Chair.
2 sets. Please beam the first set. Colleagues, these are the minutes of the 9th of March 2023. We're looking at it was a briefing on the status of the SNDF morale as per the survey and the general matters affecting morale in the force. 2, briefing on the impact of biennial military skills development program intakes, training schedules, and the impact on rejuvenation. and also reference to deal with the issue of University Reserve Training Program and the minutes. So please go to the attendance. This is the attendance register. Complete it. This is page 2. Page 3. We're looking for corrections. Page 4. Page 5. Page 6. And page 7. Oh, gone to over to page 8. Colleagues, I present these minutes. I'm proposing them for adoption. Is any mover?
I move, Chair. Mafanya.
Mr. Mafanya moves. And
I second it.
Mr. Matsamai seconds. Thank you very much. The minutes are actually adopted. The second set, second and last. So, colleagues, we're dealing with the briefing on funding for DOD, funding for domestic defense research and development. And it was the briefing by Denel on their ability to support the SNDF following the tabling of the midterm budget statement, policy statement. And we dealt with the minutes or the midterm review as well as the minutes. This is a report. This is the attendance, sorry. Please complete the record of attendance. It's page 2, page 3. Page 4. Page 5. Page 6. Page 7. And page 8. Colleagues, these are the minutes. I present them for adoption.
I propose.
Mr. Mare proposes, and seconded by?
Matsamai seconded.
Mr. Matsamai seconds. Colleagues, so the minutes are duly adopted. With that, I think that takes us to the end of the meeting. And we wish to thank all of you for taking your time out. Yes.
Okay. This is our last meeting for this term.
This is the last meeting for this term.
Yes.
Right?
And there was a program that Willem and myself did share. So I don't know whether you will be looking at the first meeting or the whole program. Maybe you haven't applied your mind to the whole
I thought
program.
we were going to get cake, Nandipa, if it's the last meeting. You were going to provide cake or what?
Let's, can you repeat, Mr. Ryder? Okay.
No,
Please
just on a
present
lighter
it.
note.
Oh, okay, sure. Please present it. I invite you colleagues to deal with the first 2 days of our meeting, and then defer the rest to the next sitting. I couldn't apply my mind on this. I doubt you also had done so. Just present the thing.
Chair, just a second. I just want to open it and just perhaps it would be wise to perhaps it would be wise just to look at the first meeting. I'll flag it in a second.
Sure. Okay.
Chair, is it visible on your side? I'll just zoom in a bit.
Yes, it is. Go to the first page.
The reason why I'm thinking it's perhaps wise to just look at the first meeting is because our scheduled second meeting can't take place due to a public holiday.
Okay.
Yeah, and so the proposal for the first meeting is basically a move over of matters that were dealt with in this term, but that were shifted to the next term because we didn't have time for those, or during meetings, it was requested by the committee to look at those at a later date. So the proposal for the two aspects are briefing by the DoD on projects allocated to ArmScore and the level of satisfaction of these projects, including services rendered by the ArmScore dockyard, and feedback by the DoD on the outcome of the workshop with ArmScore on spares and maintenance. So, Chair, you'll recall that those two matters are interrelated, and it was on the program about 2 or 3 weeks ago. There wasn't time for this, and they said they're still going to have this workshop, and it would be better to provide feedback after this workshop. So that's why we try to include it as soon as possible.
Okay.
Excellent.
And yes,
Excellent
Mr. Murray.
Excellent suggestions, Chair.
Excellent suggestions. Okay.
Those are relevant, and some of them are. It's not new, but it's rollover matters.
Okay. Now, colleagues, that is fine. So, and then we'll adopt the program for the term on the 20th of April. Agreed?
Yes, Chairperson, can I also ask that we at that stage maybe get feedback with regards to the study tour? Just in terms of progress, where we stand, and approvals, and anything outstanding at that stage that we need to know of.
Okay. No, that is accepted. Please, colleagues, Velem will send out the draft program. I invite you to comment so that when I table the program next on the 20th, it has been, it incorporates your input as well. Not everything you say will be incorporated in this term, in the second term. Some may appear in the third term and the fourth term. My wish is not to overload a meeting, because if you overload it, you'll end up not doing justice to the items on the agenda.
Correct.
So we need we need to keep it. Yeah, I think we've pointed that out before. Okay, colleagues. So this is the thing. It's adopted. No objection. We can then say we close the meeting on this note. Is that correct?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, colleagues. The meeting stands adjourned until we meet again.
Thank you.
Right. Cool.